For those of you who don't know me, my name is Aram. I'm the CEO of Codific, and I have about 15 years of experience in AppSec as a researcher, then as an industry expert, and lately as part of the OWASP SAM core team. This is not an OWASP SAM call, it's a SAMMY Community Call that is completely owned and organized by Codific. If you are here for a SAM call, for an OWASP SAM call, stick around, don't go away. But there are two SAM community calls tomorrow and on Friday. And actually, before that, I'll come back to that in a sec. So in general, during these calls, we like to do, well, we already did a brief round of introductions. We like to do a very quick intro to SAMMY for people who have never seen it, who have never used it, or maybe you haven't used it too much in depth. So it's not going to be a full-fledged demo. And then we would like to share the new features and discuss and share with you the roadmap of what we're working on. Aside from that, we have Jason from Sign-In Solutions who will share some of their experiences with how they're using SAM and SAMMY. The user base of SAM and SAMMY is growing, I would say, very rapidly. And there are, aside from these calls, there are also the SAM user day calls, the SAM community calls and the user days where people are sharing their story of how they're using SAM as well. And at the end, we would like to open the floor for discussions, and time-wise, I would think that we should have about 20 to 30 minutes for discussions, maybe a little bit less. Before that, I want to share with you the SAM community activities that are upcoming. So there are two community calls which are this week, tomorrow, and on Friday. Tomorrow it's 9:30 p.m. European time, or sorry, 9:30 a.m. American. No, wait, I got it wrong. Now, yeah, 9:30 p.m. European time and 3:30 p.m. Eastern time. And then Friday, it's 3:30 p.m. or 15:30 Central European time. You have to subscribe on Meetup of OWASP SAM. Here is the link. There's also a Slack channel for any SAM-related questions that you might have, and there is a GitHub of the project. Aside from that, there is a SAM user day coming up, which is combined with DSOM, which is another maturity model focused on DevSecOps in Washington, D.C. Everyone is very much welcome if you're around or if you could come. It's co-located with OWASP Global AppSec Conference, which starts on the 6th of November. You will find more information on owaspsam.org about this event, the agenda, and how to register for that. And with that, we are going to switch completely to SAMMY. For people who are not familiar with the tool or who haven't used it much, essentially SAMMY starts off as SAMMY is an evaluation platform, and it starts with an evaluation of where you are currently. And to do that evaluation, you can use SAM, but you can use virtually any other framework which represents a set of best practices like NIST-CSF. You can use even BSIM, DSOM, and I think the number of models in the tool has grown quite spectacularly in the last months. And every model is going to have different number of, I'm going to call things, but I'll refine that later on. We call them elements or streams. It's going to have different number of streams that you have to assess in order to get the full view of where you are currently, whether that's a specific scope, team, organization, line of business, whatever your scope is set to be. So for the SAM model, there are 30 streams that you have to assess, and then you're going to get a score, you're going to get your evaluation. For NIST-CSF, there are 106 outcomes. And then once you do all of that, you're going to end up with a specific score, which is this assessment part, as you can see here. That is the start of your security journey, essentially. That's not the end story. You don't want to do an assessment. To be honest, I wouldn't do an assessment if you're not planning to do any improvements. So you start with an assessment, and this validation step, I'm going to come back to that later. And after that, you're going to pick certain activities for improvement, and other activities you are going to leave them as is, and you're going to come back to that later. And the SAMMY tool completely supports this chart, and it might look complicated, but it is complicated because it can. It essentially offers different use cases that you can implement using the platform for your own company. Before we go to new features, I have a small demo to show for what that means, how that looks like in the tool. People who are already very, very familiar with the tool, you should still have a look because this might be interesting. So I'm going to first create a new scope, which I will put under an existing other parent scope. I'm not sure if you know this feature, but you can now organize scopes in subfolders below certain parents, and I'm going to come back to that later in new features demo. You can select whichever framework you would like to do an assessment with, and then which teams should have access to that. And just select all because I don't know which team my user is. And then you can select that new scope from the drop down. And once you do that, you start actually the assessment. And the assessment is answering the full set of questions that comes with every framework to evaluate where you are. And in this case, I'm going to just do one. I'm going to pick one stream to assess regarding the strategy and metrics. And let's say we have these set of answers. And that's it. Now I've done my evaluation. I'm ready to submit this. Something that SAMMY offers in addition to the evaluation is also documentation, where you can add any sort of evidences, observations, even recommendations for a certain stream. We call it a stream, but it can be a different name in every framework. And it is essential that to mention that this documentation will stay in the system. So you can always come back to this evaluation, what happened to it throughout the time. You can also check the score. What was the score? How is it improving? So it is sort of you can call it an audit trail. Now, if you do that for all the streams, you're going to get a full assessment, and a lot more is going to get unlocked essentially. And I'm going to switch to another assessment that has been already done. We're not going to do this in this quick demo. This is what a full assessment looks like once it's filled out. And the interesting information is actually in the reporting, where you can see how well is Fluffy Cloud doing when it comes to all the scores across all business functions or practices. And then there are additional charts that demonstrate sort of how far they are from where they need to be. And that is the concept of a target posture. So a target posture essentially is the bar. And in any organization, security is not an absolute thing. You're not going to tell a team you have to max out on every possible security best practice out there. You're typically going to look at your application risk, or sorry, your risk for that specific team, for that specific scope. And then you're going to define a level, an acceptable threshold, an acceptable level of risk, where you would like that scope or that team to be, whether it's a team, whether it's a team, a line of business, you're going to define where you want them to be in terms of risk. And that target posture essentially represents that risk level or the bar. And that is indicated here by these, in this case, red and green. Green means you are past the target. Red means you are still not below the target for some of the activities. And then this is sort of a snapshot of everything that is red means you're not getting to your target. You still need to improve these things. Based on this, as a team, then you can ask them to start improving. And let me pick something that is red. So I will pick the threat assessment, and I'm going to start for application risk profiles. I can start an improvement process, and then select the scores that I want to get to after the improvement. Let's say I just want to do this one because it's the one where I'm away from the target. And then as an improver or someone in charge of the improvement, I also have to provide an improvement plan, what it looks like, and give it a deadline. Once that's ready, you can finalize the plan and then start working the plan. So this is just the plan, it's not done yet. The team has to go and behind the screens actually do this improvement, whatever is required here, making sure that all applications are classified according to business risk. What is also interesting in the tool is that you can push this to Jira, so you don't have to make your dev team all join and onboard the tool. You can have someone who's in charge of this AppSec program implementation, and that person will be pushing these actual work activities to Jira, where they will ask, hey, you need to actually implement this. And then that works by simply pulling, the SAMMY will pull all Jira projects, and then it will ask you whether you want a task or an epic, and it's going to create a Jira issue. And now I have a link to my Jira issue. Once that issue is done in Jira, it's going to sync back and then mark it as done here. I think that sort of concludes the basic demo. I don't want to go too far in the details. I want to show you the newest features. Everyone can play with the tool. There is a freemium version that has most of the stuff in it, except for the Jira thing, I think. You can contact my team here if you would like to see a more in-depth demo, by the way. So the key update, so last community call we did was for version 3.33. Now we are at 3.55. I'm pretty much sure the next version is going to be probably 3.99. So we have added a lot of new frameworks, which I'm not going to demonstrate. There is not much to talk about. We have also added something that we call framework baselines. So many frameworks like the cybersecurity fundamentals, and NIST 853 are sort of a superset of all best practice, I'm going to call them. And then NIST, I forgot the name of the Belgian company, of the Belgian organization that manages cybersecurity fundamentals. But anyway, sorry, CCB, yes, CCB, thank you, is going to say, okay, you know what, if your risk is low, here is the baseline for that low, to make sure that you are within that low, that you have implemented the absolute basic minimum that should be giving you a low bar, or getting you to the low bar. This is essentially a sort of target posture, and now the SAMMY tool supports this sort of more natively. What does it mean? It means that CMMC levels 1 and 2 are supported as subset frameworks, so you don't have to go through the full framework, you don't have to fill out the full assessment for CMMC was based on NIST 800-173. I'm not super sure, but it's a subset of that. NIST 853 low is also a subset of all possible controls. So you're not going to get bombarded with a full framework, but you're going to get a subset of it visually. We have a ton of UI and UX improvements, which I'm not going to discuss. But then the more interesting, the big features are, we have added a CRA readiness target posture for SAM. And this is still largely work in progress, and it's also part of the discussion section. We have now Jira integration for the improvement plans, which I've just demonstrated. So you, instead of doing all of this work in a SAMMY tool, you can create an improvement plan and then push it as an implementation in Jira. We've implemented the SAM benchmark integration. So I'm not sure if you're aware, but there is a SAM benchmark project which has already quite some data of real-world organizations and their SAM scores. We have pulled in this data in a very nice format, and I'm going to show you in a little bit. And we have also added API to pull in assessment information in your Power BI dashboards and so on, or whatever dashboards that you're using in a very easy way, so that you can create your dashboards with your SAM scores for your organization. I am pretty sure I'm forgetting a lot of other features, but I guess they were smaller, so I decided not to put them here. Again, if you would like to see the full demo of the SAMMY tool, reach out to my team and they would be happy to assist you. Let's switch to the tool and show you a couple of these items. So I will first show you the baselines. So if I switch to cybersecurity fundamentals, there are two options for working baselines. First of all, you can set up a target posture. And if your target posture for a certain question says this is not applicable, you can use these hide irrelevant questions to just clear all that. And then you're going to see a subset of the framework. It's as easy as that. We have also created actually those subset frameworks as first-class citizens, but that is already done for CMMC levels 1 and 2. But we can also, in theory, create that for Siphon Basic and Siphon Important, which are subset of the Siphon framework. I guess this is mainly interesting for the Belgian participants, although I'm seeing a lot of Belgian participants in the call. For the US participants, a similar set of a similar functionality is there for NIST 853 and the CMMC levels 1 and 2. For anybody else outside Belgium and the US, I'm pretty sure you can figure out similar use case for any other framework. You can use this even for SAM, where you would say, hey, actually, this business function, let's say operations, is not applicable for me. So I'm going to mark a target posture with no's everywhere, and it will be just hidden from the browser, from model browser, which means you're going to have less things to evaluate. You're not going to be seeing the rest of the noise that you don't want to see. Again, sort of implemented in these with these target postures. As you can imagine, the target postures are a super powerful concept. We have the CRA readiness baseline, which is a target. This target posture is now right now only for the SAM framework, but in theory, you could also make the same target posture if you're using another framework. Let's say PSIM 15. If you're a PSIM user, you could create a target posture for PSIM 15. A CRA readiness baseline or something that tells you, okay, if you do all of these PSIM activities, or in this case, SAM activities, you're probably going to get to a minimum requirement for the CRA. It doesn't mean, by the way, it doesn't mean by any means that this is enough. If you get to these scores, right now, the orange target scores here are coming from the CRA. We also have added, by the way, these target postures you can also add documentation on top of that. And in this case, we've added references to the CRA legislation or regulation. I'm not sure, one of the two, I'm not a legal person. But anyway, the text of the CRA, the articles that tell you, okay, you know what, you need to have, where's this? Application risk profiles. You need to know what your application risk profile is. Honestly, I wouldn't imagine why you wouldn't do this, whatever. If you have an AppSec program, you should be doing this. But we have added references to the actual articles that say, hey, this is actually required. But doesn't mean that if you have all of that, you are good with CRA. It's sort of the minimum necessary parts that you need to cover. And yeah, the full CRA target posture has also these references for every activity, and you can easily check how far you are from the CRA readiness target, which I'm presenting here. Right now, the CRA baseline is selected. By the way, you can switch between these target postures. You can have multiple ones. For now, you cannot combine it, although it's one of the features on the backlog that you would also potentially be able to combine different target postures if you have to comply with multiple regulations. In this case, Fluffy Cloud is 73% to target for the CRA baseline, for the CRA readiness. The smaller feature, which is the SAM benchmark, I told you that SAM benchmark has been integrated. You can see that here. This is only available for SAM, unfortunately. You can see how other companies are doing when it comes to every SAM-related question throughout the SAMMY platform. So 52% don't have standard methodology for threat modeling, which is not surprising. Honestly, I think that even these companies, it's going to be probably more. That's a joke. And there is also actually the SAM benchmark as a target posture in there. This one is going to give you the distribution of the answers in the benchmark, while the SAM target posture is going to give you the median. Essentially, this tells you if you don't know what to improve on, if you have an AppSec program in place and you don't know where to start, you can look at the SAM benchmark and see how far you are from others and then use that for prioritization. these are the two use cases to compare with others. As opposed to BSIM, SAM doesn't give you vertical comparison, so you cannot compare yourself to a player in the same industry or in the same vertical. But again, this is not something that we do as a company. We pull this from the SAM project. Something really cool is what we call the scopes hierarchy. So now you can actually use an organigram of your organization with, especially for larger organizations, this is hyper useful, where you can create a schematics of how your organization is constructed, and then see what are the scores, how are the scores being aggregated upwards. So in this case, you can see that, for instance, my cloud hosted apps, which are these three, have an average score for SAM 1.8, and then an average score for cybersecurity fundamentals 1.4. I think you can, well, it can also, if you have target postures everywhere, it's going to also tell you how far is it from target posture on average. It's an average score, but it gives you an indication, it gives you an easy way to check. And this is probably interesting for the board to give them an idea of how well is this line of business doing, how well is the organization doing in terms of overall security in a quick numeric way. I'm not saying that this number is, I wouldn't call it very meaningful, in the sense of it doesn't tell you what you have to do, but it just gives you an idea. Okay, we are, I don't know, 5% away from our target. We're almost there. Versus we are really far from our target because everybody needs to comply with CRA, and this is what it looks like for as an average for the organization. And you can tell that story if you need to the board. And then the last part of my demo is the API, and the API is actually pretty straightforward. First of all, we actually have a role that can, sort of a platform manager role, which has been newly added. It's not super important, but not everyone can just go in the SAMMY tool and activate the integrations for your tenant. It's a role that has the rights to do so. So once the role activates that, from that point on, people who are interested in access control, it's not that the organization has full access to Jira or that the organization, everyone in the organization can get access to the API. It's actually, the rest happens at the level of the user. So the user should be adding his own Jira token so he can talk to the projects. And the reason for this is, maybe I'm going too technical here, but you don't want to give access as an organization to the whole Jira, and I don't think that's even possible technically. It's the user who's going to get his own authentication token from Jira and throw in issues to Jira that he has access to. So the access control is happening in Jira. And sort of the same thing is the reverse situation with the API. I can create an API key here. And this is an API key for SAMMY. We do have the option that the key whenever it requires. I know, probably not the best choice, but we might revisit that decision. So I have an API key, and I can go back to integration. Yes, I can just show you how that works. And then I can pull in information on the assessments, the scores, basically almost anything that is data in a SAMMY tool. You can integrate that with your APIs, with your Power APIs, dashboards, or whatever backend systems that you need to give access to, and then pull in this data and show it there. Because many organizations won't actually love these dashboards, the reporting. They want to show this in their centralized dashboards. And now there is an easy way to do that by using the API. Which brings me to the roadmap. And the roadmap is, there is one item on the roadmap that makes me super happy, which we started working on, is we started working on high quality mappings between frameworks. And we already had some high quality mappings in the frameworks. But to this moment, that those mappings were not really used. I'm going to just quickly demonstrate what I mean. So you could go to a SAM assessment and you would say, okay, I want to map that to I don't know, DSOM. I want to see how that looks like. What are my scores if I would go to DSOM for each of these activities? And then you can see, okay, for, I don't know, for training, this maps to these DSOM streams, and the score for this activity in my assessment is 0. I mean, it's not bad. It's not bad. You could export it to Excel and do some stuff with it. But honestly, so far I was feeling that this isn't where we need to get. And now we finally started working on automated assessments, which is where we actually want to go. Many organizations face multiple frameworks. They have to work with multiple frameworks. US companies have to work with NIST SSDFs. But this SSDF is not that great if you want to introduce it as an AppSec program. BSIM and SAM are much better. Obviously, I love SAM better than BSIM, but you could still use BSIM if you're a BSIM user. But then you still need to prove sort of compliance if you have regulatory pressures with NIST SSDF. And we've now started working on automated assessments based on these high quality mappings, where you could click a button and generate an assessment based on existing assessment. We're planning, and we have mappings between a SAM DSOM, SAM SSDF, and BSIM SSDF, and probably BSIM SAM. Don't ask me why these ones. Well, SAM DSOM, it was a work with Timo that we did. The other ones, don't ask me why I need this. Why are we picking these? But do give us feedback whether you would like other sort of mappings in here. We are also starting to work on a NIST2 assessment model, which has been donated to us by a partner in SAMMY. I'm not sure how much I may disclose there. I'll wait till the discussion part where my colleagues might jump in. And then the roadmap is also largely shaped by your feedback, we get from customers. So discussion topics might be also an input for changing the roadmap a little bit, or shaping the roadmap. Of course, there are a ton of UI features and smaller bugs, but I'm not going to put it here because they are not that impactful. All right, I'd like to give the word to Jason, who is Director of Compliance and Security from Sign-In Solutions. Jason, we have invited Jason. Thank you very much, Jason, to share their experience with SAMMY and SAM. And the floor is yours, Jason. Thank you.
Yeah, hello everyone again. Jason here. Been asked to just speak on how we use SAM in relation to application security. So there's 3 key things here. First one is scaling application security. Second one would be cyber insurance and premiums, and third one would be around GDPR. Starting with the first one around scaling our application security, we have 7+ merger and acquisition companies that we've acquired and put together. And of course, the challenge with that is each have their own perspectives and way of things. So for us is we use SAMMY and the SAM framework to essentially scale up companies that are not up to par with our more mature ones. And instead of coming down with a lot of hard deliverables and checklists, we do it silently, meaning it's in small and manageable steps instead of trying to revamp everything at once. Key factor with that is, we look at security impact checks. We look at, dependency scanning and their CI and any other mandatory security testing before prod releases. And typically a lot of these should be part of any company's change management. But for us, there are gaps, or there are bridges that some development team do that works. But if you're trying to scale and standardize into one's set of controls or into the program, you will face challenges. So for us, that's where we used it. So things like ticket triages and sprint planning is going to differ per development team, and we have 7+ of them. And the challenge on top of that is context switching. Typically our engineers, they go into compliance mode and back to engineer mode. So what we've done is we've just used OSSAM as a compensatory control alongside how they're doing daily things, and we iterate very slowly. Some teams, they take 2 months, and some teams they take 2-3 days. But the whole purpose of that is we want to keep it as natural as possible. The second one we use it for is as Aram mentioned, it's interesting to him. For us, it's kind of our daily practice. I'm also in the legal team, so we have a very tight-knit approach to things. Cyber insurance and premiums is typically when you do your renewals for your cyber insurance. You would present what you have, what your potential risks are, and what your residual risks are. Now, the challenges of those is you typically would rely on your compliance programs, documents, and material practices. You may have ISO, SOC 2. For us, we're also a FedRAMP shop. That's a U.S. federal government cybersecurity framework. So for us, showing all of these, it may sound broad and shallow, but depending on your level of posture, again, I mentioned we have 7+ different companies. So for us, when we pull fragmented docs in front of our cyber insurance provider, we get scored at a higher risk rating. Now, what we use with OSM is it's what we call a permeating compensatory control. Essentially, during the deeper assessment of cyber insurance renewal, we have presented OSM earlier this year to show that, hey, our application security is not just a tick box. We can also measure it. And that gives our insurers confidence that we actually have application security, not part of an overall framework or set of tick boxes. We have shown a preview, a couple of pages of how it works, and that's sufficient enough for us to engage in favorable negotiations. And ultimately, what a cyber insurance provider would want to see is how are you managing, mitigating, and diminishing the risk. Third update I have is may be relevant to those in EU, but we are here in North America. So for us to service our European customers, GDPR is our bread and butter. A lot of its principles we turn as default controls. So one of them is Article 25 of data protection by design and default. We use cyber kill chain, which is a threat modeling practice, into our review sessions. But we tied that through OSM. So rather than coming in hot and saying, hey, you must do this threat modeling for application to be secure, we tied back to actual values of our company, which is one of them is adherence to GDPR. Another factor is things like just daily practice for engineers, like are you logging securely? Are you always checking your accesses? Are you looking at your basic configurations to make sure none is a default? They're all bespoke and customized, and then we bake that in as part of our GDPR process. So in summary, for our business, the usage of OSM, specifically for our engineers, is they like it because they don't feel forced into it, and it's a mutually learning process for both of us, meaning our compliance team and our TN security team. And then on more of the external factor, more of the higher level business side, it is actually helpful in terms of getting favorable cyber insurance coverage.
Thanks, Jason. Honestly, the insurance is so operationalizing best practices and making them part of your habits of your teams is not surprising for me, because I'm also like that's the angle that we've developed the tool. But getting a better premium deals from cyber insurance was really an eye opener for me. It was really cool. Thanks everyone. Thanks, Jason. I think the next part is actually the discussions, and at this point I'm going to stop the recording, and then we can open the floor for any questions, anything